The gaming industry is becoming sort of a joke right now, and there's no better example of this than Ubisoft itself fighting itself in a new competition of seeing what is actually at the core and source of a successful game. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with Clair Obscur developer Sandfall Interactive, which is filled with ex-Ubisoft devs that felt stifled in Ubisoft's lack of focus of producing good content, and they branched out and made their own studio, and it now has a more successful title than all the AAA titles that have come out these past few years from Ubisoft itself. And I think this is a situation where you realize a lot of the big corporations that are working on titles in the industry today simply do not have the talent, skills, or forethought to produce content that is in line with what the gamers actually want to play. And I think Clair Obscur is the best example of this because it's just showing where the talent goes in a gigantic organization like Ubisoft. They leave the company, they exit the company, and they produce something absolutely stellar on their own. And I think this is proof perfect of what happens to these big developers, where they bleed out talent and they bring in people that are more focused on the glory of the company rather than building its future. And I think that's what we see with a lot of the staff at Ubisoft and the failures of the titles that have come out these past few years. And that's why we have a divided France right now, because these are both French companies with French employees. And we're seeing the difference so starkly between the two companies because they have a different makeup, focus, and passion. And I think that's why it's crazy to see this example play out in reality, where we can see what happens when you have passionate developers working on a project and when you have dispassionate organizational elements that are more focused on their political ends and means rather than the gamers and game players. And I think that's what we see with the differences in results with Ubisoft and its multitude of games, specifically Assassin's Creed Shadows. And I think that is the biggest dynamic that we're seeing right now. Assassin's Creed Shadows versus Clair Obscur. They came out in the same time frame with different complete results and a use of resources and total involvement of employees. And that's what we're comparing here. We're comparing a large AAA company that tried to produce content that is a large standing open world, kind of semi-open world game that has multiple choice options and story elements. And we're seeing a similar game with Clair Obscur from ex-Ubisoft developers creating something that was equal and maybe even better than a AAA title. And you can compare the budgets for both of these titles, where Assassin's Creed Shadows tops out at $350 million budget with over 20,000 employees working on the game. And then you have something like Clair Obscur being developed by Sandfall Interactive, based on a $5.5 million budget, creating a story that is way better, more interactive, and gameplay that is just more engaging. It just shows that you really don't need that many people to actually work on a successful game in the industry. You can just have 33 people. I think it's total out at 50 with the crunch time developers from overseas that they brought in. So it's not that many people that they needed to actually produce good content and to produce a game that was highly effective in delivering its message and intent of actually bringing fun to the game players. And it kind of makes you feel like everything that we see at these AAA companies is kind of just a farcical joke where they're spending money in places that are useless and unneeded. And I think that's the thing that we see with Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed Shadows, where we watch the ending of Assassin's Creed Shadows and the credits can go for over 2 hours long, where they are listing over 10,000 people that worked on the game that didn't really need that much effort, that felt incomplete and incomprehensible at times. And it brings to focus what's actually happening in the gaming industry, the corporatization, and more than anything, the hiring of useless talent that can't bring anything to the process of the gaming world. And I think we always see this corporatization in a lot of companies when they go public, but I don't think we see it in this measure, where we bring in so much people that have no effect on the game, that have detrimental effects on the game, in fact, and we're producing lesser content at a slower pace. I think that's the thing that we all find frustrating as gamers when it comes to the current state of the gaming industry. I remember we used to get games that come out like every 1 or 2 years, sequels that came out so quickly. I know people are going to say it's the graphical power, but I think it's the bloat that happens to these companies as well, where you have to go through so many checks and balances to get anything done, where you can't finish a game on time. And I think that's what we're seeing with the difference between Clair Obscur and Ubisoft right now, where Ubisoft probably took double the time to create a lesser product, while Clair Obscur took less time to create something that's superior. And I think that's the thing that we keep seeing initially with a lot of the development processes happening in the gaming industry, where it's just simply more effective to have less people. And I think that's what we saw with Black Myth Wukong. We saw this with so much other titles that came out with massive success, where they had only like 40 people to create the game. It took less than 4 years to produce it. And I think that's the situation that we can't ignore anymore in the gaming industry, where we have developers that just can't match the quality of indie developers. And we see this subsequently happening so much in the gaming industry, where we see small titles like Schedule One, My Side, that pop out of nowhere, that grab the attention of gamers and are making a killing in the industry. And I think this will be probably the standard situation, especially with AI development tools coming on hand in the future, where being a AAA company is going to take more than a 20K employee count. It's going to take less than that. It's going to take probably 10 people to produce a high quality game in the future. And I think these AAA developers are probably on a knife edge of destruction. I think Clair Obscur is the best example of that when you just look at the pure development team of the game, where it's just a simple group of over 33 developers, over 15 core developers here, and they look like normal people. And I think that's the stark difference that we see in the current day modern gaming environment, where you have people that seemingly don't look like they're interested in games at the core development team. And I think that's what you don't see with Clair Obscur. You see people that seem very interested in gaming. And I know people are going to say, you're just saying that because there's more male developers there. But yeah, that's usually the case with quality games. You have more people that are interested in the actual game, and the diversity that you see there is purely incidental. It's not manufactured. And I think that's what we see at Ubisoft, where we have manufactured diversity, where we're including people that shouldn't be included, that provide input that is the antithesis of what will produce a successful game. And I think that's exactly what we see with Ubisoft. Ubisoft produced the most destructive personalities in the gaming industry. I'm talking about Clem Belair and Sweet Baby Inc. She's right there in the center, and she was a Ubisoft product. And I think that's what we see with a lot of the developers nowadays. They're there to produce content that is focused on something outside of gaming. And I think that's not what we see with the development team for Clair Obscur. It looks like they're people that are interested in gaming, and any diversity representative there is there because the person is quality talent that is producing some successful output for that game. And I think that is the perfect reflection of diversity that you want to see in gaming. You want to see people that actually have the talent be there and able to contribute something positive. And it's clear that's the case with Clair Obscur. People are seeing the positivity of its impact, and it's selling so much so that this game is already in the profit margin right now. It already recouped all of its costs. It only cost $5.5 million to sell the game for $50, and it's a higher quality game than the $100 Assassin's Creed game that people were supposed to be hyping up as a defining entry in the franchise. And it just shows the comparison and the games that we see with AAA companies, where you see Clair Obscur, Sandfall Interactive, given the clear numbers of what is sold on the market, where we have 1 million copies sold directly to gamers. It's not even talking about Xbox Game Pass or anyone streaming or anything like that. It's talking about what has sold directly to the game players. And that is a clear-cut mention of the profit margin that they're bringing in. And that is showing even on Steam with the player count, where the player count is enormous compared to some other lesser games that have to flaunt the player count, where we have Assassin's Creed saying 3 million players. But what are those 3 million players? Are those 3 million players from its own subscription service that may have glanced and clicked on the description of the game, not even playing it? That seems to be the case for all the descriptors that we're getting from Ubisoft right now, where we have a game of musical chairs where they're fudging numbers and information to appear grander, when in actuality they're going bankrupt and need to sell half of their IP to Tencent in order to survive. And that is just the reality of the situation in the gaming industry. It's become a game of misinformation and false praise and ghost terms for success. And I think that's what Assassin's Creed Shadows is. It's a failure of a title trying to pretend to be a successful entity that is supporting Ubisoft for the future. And that is just the anger that we're seeing from Ubisoft towards the ex-developers that have made the company itself a joke of a franchise. But this is just my thoughts on the situation. I love this game, Clair Obscur. It's getting all the positive attention it deserves. It kind of scares me that it's getting this positive attention, because all these magazines, these are the people that will come in for the next project that is being produced for Sandfall Interactive. and try to have their input and say so on what should be in the game itself. And that's where I have my own apprehension towards all the praise that we're seeing. But regardless, it's doing better than anything at Ubisoft, where it has to flaunt its fake successes. And I, for one, enjoy that Ubisoft is being made into a joke now. It's well deserved. They produce so much terrible games for the past few years that I think it's much needed to see one of these AAA developers fall flat on their face. And it makes it even sweeter that's coming from ex-developers that left the company to make something on their own. And I like that part of the story. But that's just my 2 cents on the situation. Maybe you disagree with me. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.